I am recording the first slide, so it could only mean one thing. That's right, folks. It means that Lecture 2 is now in the books and ready to go. It was a little bit of a longer video than we've done previously. We're about an hour and a half, but it is time to start hitting some really good content points. So I hope that you do stick with it and that you do, to some degree, enjoy it. We very much begin the building process of section number 1 in this lecture. So there's a couple of different things for your consideration. As far as the picture, I actually took this picture a very, very long time ago, but it's remained one of my favorites throughout the years. That is a picture of a place called Jenny Lake, and in the background are the Grand Tetons out in Wyoming. Those two young gentlemen sitting in front of me are Jacob and Rafael Perez. They're a lot bigger now. This picture was taken some time ago, but it's always remained one of the pictures that I enjoy sharing with my class. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy the lecture, and I will see you back again in lecture number 3. For tonight, I have 4 primary goals for us to examine together. I'd like to, first off, continue the discussion about the research problem, but instead of talking more about the development of the problem, I'd like to talk about how we're going to express it and how we're going to write to it. That is very naturally, hopefully, going to lead to the development of several research questions that are in many ways going to drive our research. And then we're going to take a last little look there in that sequence and come up with a couple of key words and phrases that are going to be very, very useful when it comes to using it for ProQuest and EBSCO. And these are different search engines that we'll use in order to get you the articles, the scholarly articles that you need, not only to finish up section 1, but also to complete section number 2. And then you're going to take your first look at the format for section number 1. So it is a full slate for tonight. Let's get cracking at it. Let's jump right into the deep end of this pool and talk about the research writing models that I have to show you. Before we move on to the next slide, I want to remind you that in lecture number 1, there was a series of slides that had to do with developing a problem and understanding where a problem is coming from. As we go through this extension of that lecture, I want you to kind of have that in the back of your mind as you kind of go through it, and certainly as you consider doing the 2 try it nows that are a part of this sequence. Let's take a look. Well, clearly, Perez, you've made some sort of mistake, because in the previous slide you mentioned that we're going to begin our research by looking at a problem statement, when in reality we all know that you start a research thesis by looking at by picking a topic. Well, the short answer to that is nope. And the second answer to that is, well, at least not necessarily. And the answer is very, very simple. I used to start with the topic, many years ago, because that is kind of like the long-standing tradition to it. But over the years, what I used to notice is at the end of that particular lecture, at the end of that particular evening, back in the olden days when we actually used to meet in person, what used to eventually happen towards the end of the evening was that the topics were all over the place. Some were super broad, like, hey, Perez, I want to study ICT. I want to study co-teaching. Okay, great. Where do we even start? Or on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of students used to pick a topic that was so narrow and focused that it would be near impossible to open up that particular topic to actually write all the pages that are going to need to be written at some point this semester. So instead of doing it that way, the way that I kind of came across through reading over the years was that we would start with identification of some sort of problem. And the reason that I like this path better than the other way is that if you could identify a problem, then you could also identify a solution. If you could identify the solution, then you have a way forward in your research world with which to push that research project. Let's take a look at some specifics on that on the other slide. The way that I like to do these next couple slides is I'm going to use the try it now slides that I had mentioned way back at the beginning of lecture. For those of you that don't know what a try it now is or have recently forgotten, it's my way of helping you practice kind of building muscle memory for different tasks that kind of lead up into something a little bit bigger. And in this case, we're leading up towards your first assignment, which is section number 1. So we're looking at the research problem. We're going to take a try it now approach. So you are going to be doing a little bit of work, should you choose, within the next couple slides. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through some of this information here. When we talk about the research problem, it's actually pretty rare that just humans in general could accomplish, larger goals without having some sort of, kind of plan in place. And that plan, or that what I call the inquiry plan, is really a good place for us to start as researchers. In a lot of ways, teachers, and if you look at bullet point number 2 there, teachers are very good problem solvers. We understand the general concept of, I see something that's wrong, this is how I'm going to go about fixing it, and this is how I did. And then go through that cycle kind of over and over again. As we talk about that cycle of fixing things and what is to become your research problem, one of the things I want to caution you very early about in this process is that as you list your different research problems, the question and the overriding question that you have to continuously be asking yourself is, could I, as a teacher, realistically mitigate this problem in my class? I use the word mitigate because it's very rare that you're going to solve a problem in its entirety or completely. But are you able to at least mitigate the problem to some degree? If you can't to some degree solve the problem, you know what? Don't pick it as part of your research here, because chances are it's going to lead you down a very dark and lonely road that is in all likelihood a dead end. So you want to have that kind of in the back of your mind. And then as you go and you start listing those research problems, in a way, it's going to naturally help focus your ideas. I will give you a quick example of a problem that I got last semester in the summer, and it was something that I saw in a couple of different papers. So I'll mention it here. One of the popular problems was, how does poverty, or how does socioeconomic status affect reading levels and math levels and education levels? And my comment to those people that chose that topic was always the same. It is a very valid topic. I mean, it is a very valid problem. It's a problem that has existed probably since the advent of education to some degree. But when you use that question now in bullet point number 3, can you realistically mitigate that problem? Can you solve the problem of a low socioeconomic status or living at or below poverty level? Can you change that? Can you solve that in your class? And maybe you can. But if it doesn't come to mind, and it doesn't come to mind fairly soon, that's the type of problem that you probably would want to avoid. Let's take a look at that next slide here. So yeah, you are going to have to make a couple of decisions in the next couple of slides, if you choose to do the try it now right along with me, which I hope that you do. So let's talk about that decision. The activity is going to be that you're going to choose a common problem in your school. More specifically, it could be a problem that exists within your classroom, within your department, if you're a high school teacher or a middle school teacher. However, in bullet point number 2, it also suggests that it comes from an experience or from an observation, and that you have some sort of level of interest that can be applied to that problem. If you've heard about it but never seen it, if you've listened to someone talk about it but yet never experienced it, chances are that problem may not be something that you're necessarily exposed to. And even though it could be a very real problem, if you don't have exposure to it, then there's a really good likelihood that you may not be able to study it. Another thing that I like to point out, especially in bullet point number 3 there, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be this pervasive, kind of like huge tidal wave of a problem. It could be something very small and very specific that I don't know, that frankly just gets under your skin and kind of throws off your timing, or messes up your instruction to some degree. So as long as the problem is relevant to you, and again, as long as you're able to mitigate it at some point, not right now, but at some point there is the possibility of mitigating it. It doesn't have to be such a big problem. It could be something a little more narrow in focus. So just because something is small doesn't necessarily mean that you should dismiss it from this particular activity. Last one. In the next slide, I'm going to ask you to list a couple of different research problems, just so that you give yourself some sort of options. Like list a couple so you have an idea of different ways that you may want to go with this. As much as you can, try to list one problem that has an academic impact or academic outcome, one problem that has a behavioral, and one problem that has an attitudinal outcome to it. My thinking there is that if you give yourself several different outcomes and several different places that the problem could impact, you open up yourself the possibility to say, well, you know what, this problem doesn't necessarily affect the academics of my class, but it certainly affects the behavior of the class, or the general attitude of the class. So definitely make the attempt to write one of each. One more slide here. One more. So, do you have your pen and paper ready? Perhaps a pencil? Does anybody even write anymore? Honestly, I haven't picked up a pencil and written, other than to fill out like a form and stuff like that, but to actually write out stuff. I know many of you are going to say, yeah, you have to write, Perez. I don't know, I type everything. I don't know why I've come to be that way, but I very rarely write. But anyway, let's give this try it now a good shot here. In your own words, you're going to list those. You're going to list several different problems that you see in your professional setting. As best of your ability, please try to make one academic, behavioral, or attitudinal, and that last bullet point. Oh yeah, you're only going to use one of these that you're setting forward. So when I tell you, listen, I think you should be writing 3 or 4 different root problems, you're only going to choose one of them in the end. This is simply to give you one more option on that research dollar menu, and say, you know what, I like this root problem. I think I want to go this way, but I also like this one. So you give yourself some different options. I'm gonna end this little segment here. If you're working with me, which I kind of hope that you are, but I'm gonna end this little segment here, and in the next set of slides, we'll talk about what to actually do with the research problem that you came up with right here. One of the things that you're probably going to notice sooner rather than later is that I often introduce a topic, talk about that topic, give a couple of examples, this and that, but there's usually a writing component to that topic. So in this case, in the Try It Now, which hopefully you just finished, you were able to list, I don't know, 2-3 different different problems that you see. But now we need to express them in a certain way. And just so you can hear my thinking, and I do that a lot. Sometimes I'll explain my thinking to you guys, only because it's not a secret. I want you to understand my thought process as much as, I ask you to explain your thought process. So eventually there's going to be a section or a subheading in your first assignment that's going to require you to write about the statement of the problem. With that in mind, and because I know that it's coming, I usually try to have some sort of writing component attached to a lot of the try it nows, just so you could have that writing already ready to go. So when you do sit down to write eventually, you have that already there for you, ready to work for you in a way. So let's get started. Let's talk about how we're going to write this problem statement. I love changing the slides and realize that whatever I had on this slide, I talked about on the last slide. I do that a lot. Yes, you're going to take your first steps into educational research by writing a usable problem statement. And as mentioned in the previous slide, it will be a part of your section 1, which is your first assignment coming up here eventually. So have that in mind as we go through the next couple slides. So let's do a quick model here, and if you remember correctly to our model research example, I guess I called it a couple of slides ago with the lighting and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm taking this from. And if you look at the original problem statement, the one I had originally written kind of like in the early stages, dark or poorly lit classrooms make independent reading periods difficult for students with special needs, SWSN. That was my original piece. Look at the ones that you have written. Do they kind of sound like this, where they sound almost like in layman terms? They probably do. Let's take those layman terms and now let's put it into almost like a usable sentence that now is going to begin to hopefully focus the original idea. So this is me talking pretty. Students are often exposed to broken, inadequate, or white lighting, creating suboptimal learning conditions during independent work. It kind of says the same thing in a way, but the second one obviously has a little bit of grace to it, has a little bit of authority in the words that I'm using, and that's going to be the centerpiece of the writing model here. Is the fact that you already have the original piece, and now you're going to begin to put it into different terms and different vocabulary words in order to in some ways bring it all together. I'll mention one more thing on this slide before I move on to the next one. If you notice in the me talk pretty part, it says broken, inadequate, or white lighting. Now I'm pausing here because I'm thinking to myself, which one of these do I most have the ability to solve? Which one of these do I most have the ability to mitigate using the same words that I did a couple of slides ago? For me, it was the white lighting that I could change the most. Why? Because I could go to the hardware store and pick up a couple of different types of light bulbs and do my examinations or do my assessments using different colors of lighting. Not necessarily red light or blue light, but more like a yellow light or like a daytime light or a fluorescent light. So you can see that even within the problem statement, even after you've written it nice and pretty, there's going to be smaller nuanced choices within it. Look at the next slide because it divides it even further. So take a look at how one problem, which is the original one, right? That original problem statement with the lighting. Excuse me, with the nothing like a little cold water. Take a look at how that one problem statement is now going to be divided, and almost like organically, it's going to be now more focused. Take a look. So I have one problem statement, and I have one original problem statement, and then the first statement that I kind of chopped off it is, fluorescent or poor lighting affects my students' ability to read with stamina during test prep. The addition of stamina during test prep now gives that focus. Take a look at the second one. Poor lighting affects my students' behavior, specifically to stay on task during independent work. Okay, that was the Me Talk Pretty one, kind of centered around that independent work. Okay, I get it. Room design, including poor lighting, do not adequately provide enough structure for academic growth for students in ESL. Again, do you see how by kind of amplifying, kind of dividing this into some more problem statements, I'm now beginning to differentiate who I want to work with, where I want to work with them, what content area am I going to do this research in. I said it before, but I'll say it again. You're not going to be looking at all of these. You may do one, perhaps if there's two of them that you can kind of combine, then that's your way forward. But you're looking for at least one solid problem that you know with 100% certainty that there's going to be some type of intervention that's going to mitigate it. And in this case, just to take that third bullet point, just as a random little teachable moment here, I know that I could do a little something with the room design and the way that I design my room to create different lighting spaces within my classroom. So you know what? That is my way forward. Once again, as is my custom, I said everything that I need to say on this slide in the last one. Those three problem statements were facets of the problem. A lot of times in schools, and I know that this has become a kind of like a little mini buzzword in my school, and that is that you are drilling down into a topic, meaning that as you cover the different facets, or in my case, the different types of lighting and all that good stuff, I'm drilling down into the topic with the idea that you're going to give yourself a choice about which one you certainly want to focus on. So in this whole little process, you have a second try it now slide. Imagine that, two try it now slides for the same task. This one is more of a culminating piece. You have your original list of your problem statements from the previous try it now slide, whatever it is, 2 or 3 of them. In this try it now, what I'd like for you to do is explore a little bit, explore some of those different facets within the problem. With this try it now, begin to give your original problem statement more of a personalized look to it, that is more in line with your personal research setting at the moment. And then finally, go ahead, you talk pretty. See if you can put that chosen problem statement, or maybe 1 or 2 of them, into like a nice written sentence that you will hopefully eventually use when you come to that particular subheading in section number 1. I have one list of I have one resource slide on the next one, so I'd like to look at that next. I know I left off the last slide by saying that there was going to be a resource slide here, but I was looking at it a little bit more carefully, and I found it to be a little bit redundant, so I'm going to skip it. Whatever was there, you will see it again, just not right now. Don't want to get any further into it, but that's okay. I don't think that you need it for now. Hopefully you have your one little problem statement that you wrote nice and pretty, and we can get to the overall topic, which is right now. So the cool thing about the topic, the set of slides on the topic, is that in a lot of ways, these slides are very evaluative as opposed to creating anything new. And the reason for that is as follows. Once you have a good problem statement, once the problem is firmly established in your thinking, what typically happens is that the topic kind of presents itself from the problem statement. Think back to mine for a second. Think back to mine. If I had to come up with like a little phrase or a little something to label my topic, I would turn around and say, well, it has to do with classroom lighting and ELA. That's my topic. It's almost like I didn't even really have to give it any thought. It's almost like it just kind of comes out naturally, and I'm very much hoping that it does for you, because in reality, all a topic is 3, 4, 5 words that to some degree encompasses your research. So fully expect the next couple slides to be a little more evaluative than kind of you creating anything new right now. All right, don't get lost in the sauce with this. In 5 words or less, what is your topic? Now I know a lot of you are listening to it on the train or in your car, or you weren't able to do the try it now, so you can't do this. But for those of you that were doing the try it nows and you were kind of engaged with what I was saying and thinking about it, what is your topic in 5 words or less? Give it a shot. No one's going to hold you to it. But let's evaluate whatever comes out. Good. I got a couple of elements of a good research topic, and I have to be honest, they're not in any particular order, meaning that the top one is not more important than the bottom one, but they are all fairly important, because if you don't kind of hit on most of these, chances are it's not going to be a topic that's going to be usable for you. Chances are. So the first one, that topic that you had from the last slide, can you apply it to special education? Because remember, that is your degree, and that is the department that we are all a part of. So there has to be some sort of special ed component to it. Of course, that second one is going to be, for me, the most important one as an evaluator every single time. That's why it's in red. Is there a tangible application? I'll say it a little bit differently. Is there a solution to mitigate the problem which came from which spurred that topic? Are there several facets to your topic? Meaning that are there different things or different ideas that will kind of come from it? Is your topic exhibited? Is your problem exhibited in your school, among your school staff, among the student body? Because if you're not going to be able to see that problem in your student body, then chances are you're not going to be able to take data on it. The last two are kind of go hand in hand. The first one is, does your topic, is it engaging? Does it have a high level of interest? And the second one is, it isn't like something that's obvious. It's something that's like kind of like, okay, yeah, we all know. Like, like the topic, like smart boards, do our smart boards more engaging for students? Here, let me help you with that research topic. Yes, they are. Our students going to be able to better visualize what they're reading by drawing a sketch after every page or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, these things have all been kind of done before. Let's get something that's actually going to spur some sort of level of interest within you. So tell the truth now. Did you check off a lot of those boxes with the topic that you came up with? Yeah, you probably did. You're all smart people. Let's take a look at these sample topics. Socioeconomic level of parents. The socioeconomic level of parents has an effect on the students' reading scores. You probably remember that from a couple slides ago. I used that example already. How about the second one? District and building leaders who have a strong vision have successful schools. Now, I have to tell you, those are pretty sounding sentences, and they sound like good topics. But in reality, these are non-examples. That's because you cannot impact the socioeconomic level of parents. And if you are so wealthy that you can impact the level of socioeconomic development of parents, by all means, please give me a call. I have a bridge to sell you. And the second one, it is a true statement that district and building leaders that have a strong vision are probably going to have successful schools. But I don't know about you, but I don't really see my district leader and even my building leaders, kind of see them once every couple of weeks, even before Corona hit. So these are not good examples. Of course, let's take a look at some good examples. Look at the difference of these two. Exploring the use of tangible versus extrinsic rewards during reading lessons. Let me ask you a question. As a teacher, can you give a student a tangible reward, a raisinette or a pencil from the little treasure chest that you have in the locked closet? The answer is yeah, absolutely. You can. How about an extrinsic reward? Here you go, a little sound effect, a little pat on the back, or how about a good job, buddy? You did excellent. Extrinsic reward. Can you do these things? The answer is yes, you can. About the second bullet point, a kinesthetic activity. Kinesthetic means full body learning. Ooh, giving a little stretch while we're talking about kinesthetic. Kinesthetic learning, full body learning when it comes to rote academic topics. Think of a good rote academic topic. Oh, yeah. Let's say you're in 4th grade and you're doing times tables. And instead of having the kids just sit there with flashcards, now you come up with some sort of cool and inventive and engaging activity that you found on Teachers Pay Teachers. And it's a kinesthetic activity, so you can actually do it in the classroom. That's the difference between these samples and the ones before. Whatever is here comes from a problem that can be solved, and then the topic can be seen within your classrooms. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a way forward while beginning to define what all this is going to kind of look like. With these particular samples, you begin to see that yes, these types of events are possible within your particular educational setting. So in this case, I will leave the resource page up. I'm not going to read each one of these questions for you. What you can do though is you can at your leisure go ahead and give the video a pause. And you can perhaps either begin or finish up the evaluative process by asking yourself some of these questions, and they're pretty straightforward. But similar to that checklist when we first started talking about this, if you don't have an answer to these questions, not in perfect clarity and in perfect detail, because obviously we just started the process, but if you don't have some sort of way through these questions, it should start to raise some red flags. For example, look at the second one. Does the population exhibit what you will be searching for? So in your school, in your educational setting, you're looking for something within that topic. Does the population that you work with exhibit that? If they don't, you're going to have a hard time collecting data on kids that don't exhibit what you need them to exhibit. So these are pretty straightforward and basic questions. I wouldn't spend too much time on them. For now, kind of as long as you have your research question, your problem statement, and more or less your five word topic, you're probably in all likelihood good to go. Second to last slide. I'm going to take a break. I'll let you read that. It's just my usual dire warnings that I throw into the mix every now and again. All right, folks, let's get some slides in before the afternoon gets too late here. Jumping into the deep end of the pool with some research questions. Here we go. For this particular model, I like to take somewhat of a top-down approach, meaning that on this slide, I want you to see kind of like the finished product, and then we'll get into some of the components on the next several slides, but I want you to see the whole thing first here. So this is what we have on until now. We have that topic that we started last week and we built upon last week when we wrote our problem statements. In this case, my problem statement is students with disabilities have a difficult time engaging with written content and having adequate stamina when reading independently. So this is a new part, the research questions here. Watch this. Can the speed of reading be increased by, and please note that the word by is in red and underlined, and you'll see why in just a second, be increased by using different forms of lighting in the classroom? I like that. I like the fact that that question now opens up my thinking to different forms of lighting in the classroom. Look at the next one. Will students with impaired eyesight see academic gains by, there's the word again, adjusting individual lighting needs? So with this question, instead of focusing on different lighting forms, now I'm thinking that maybe individual lighting needs is kind of the way I want to express my outcomes. You see how it begins to help you think differently about that original topic? Let's get to some of the bits and pieces here. So these two are kind of low-key, really important slides in this entire process here. So let's kind of go one by one. First off, research questions are basically an inquiry process, as opposed to, like we spoke about last week, that the inquiry process begins before the problem statement. Well, in this case, it happens to be that the inquiries that are being made after the problem statement has already been developed. In that sense, your research questions very much do begin to move your research ideas in a very specific and very particular direction. Along those lines, as you begin to move or make your choices about which research questions you want to explore versus which ones you don't, in many ways, your research questions are going to have a variety of different aspects within your topic. And that's the exploration that is going to be a part of, creating these research questions. To some degree, if you look at the bottom there, they're a free-form exercise. It's almost like a bit of a brainstorm activity. I would like to make the distinction in bullet point number 1, 2, 3, 4. The first red, 4 down. 5 down. Not all research questions need to be answered. That might also be a deviation from what you've heard in the past, where if you write down a research question, then you must answer it in your research, and that's not necessarily true for us here in action research. When it comes to hypotheses, absolutely 100%. If you put down a hypothesis, and you'll be responsible for 2 of them. We'll get to that in just a little while. Those have to be proven or disproven. But as far as your research questions, they're simply a way to get different ideas out there. Now go back to my model in the last slide. You saw how the first research question and the second research question were similar in a way, but very much different in the sense that they had very different outcomes to the questions that were being proposed. Last bullet point for me here is that middle one, begin to highlight a topic specific vocabulary. What I've noticed over the years is that all parts of the educational world, whether it's different contents and different disciplines, they all have their little content specific vocabulary. So as you write down your research questions, by all means, you should already begin to sound like an authority figure with what it is that you're writing. The reason for that is that as you begin to highlight these topic-specific vocabulary words and you begin to use them, we'll use them again actually in the next lecture when we start heading towards and looking at the literature review. I have one more slide on characteristics. Here it is. As it turns out, that slide was just a bit redundant, so in the spirit of economical lecturing, I got rid of it. There are two basic ways that you could come up with a research question. It's kind of interesting here. You have two kinds of reasoning that lead to a research question. You have deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. So let's start with the deductive part. The deductive part is based off an assumption. It most likely should be a logical assumption or something that kind of makes sense to you as a researcher. But as you have that premise and as you kind of sift through your assumptions, you begin to ask questions based on those assumptions. You're basically deducing a question from your personal theory. The other side to that is not deductive, but inductive. And inductive reasoning is based more on something that you've seen, something that you've experienced, something that you've very much have been a part of. Personally, I like the inductive part better because I feel that if I've seen it once or I've seen it twice or it's something that is a part of my everyday professional world, I more likely have a connection and somewhat of a passion to answer that question. For this particular research, though, both sides, meaning both ways of thinking about your research questions, are very valid. So if you have those assumptions or if you have those observations, by all means, they are good sources for your research questions. So as we follow this top-down model here, we're going to get to the most basic components of the research question, and that is a particular format that I happen to very much like for your research question. This format, please, is not a suggested format. When you do write your research questions, I would like to have it in this form, and there's a reason for it. I'll show you now in a second why. Let's start with the top there. First off, you have a particular direction that you would like your research question to go in. So it's either going to be phrased in the positive or the negative form. Think about it like this for bullet point number 1. If you have a off-task behavior that you wish to, yeah, that's right, decrease, that's a negative. If you have an on-task behavior, if you have something good that happens, well, that direction of the question is now going to be, yes, an increase. You want to increase that. That is the direction that the format is referring to. So you start off with a particular direction. Then you have the big 3 in the second bullet point: an academic, a behavior, or an attitude. So think about it like this. Anything that you do with your class or your students, more often than not, the vast majority of the time, hopes to impact one of those 3 things. Either you want to do something academically, you want to give them information, which is what most of us do for a living. Some of us say, well, you know what, this particular lesson or this particular moment of teaching, I want to now impact a behavior. Whatever that behavior may be, it could be a good behavior or a negative behavior, like my model up above. Finally, one of the last things that teachers hope to impact is a particular attitude or the way that students feel about something. So, recap quickly. Direction, one way or another, positive or negative, then a particular academic skill, behavior, or an attitude, and then the word by. Has to have the word by. Okay? And then finally, your topic or the aspect of your topic that you're thinking about covering. So, let's take a look at what that looks like again as a completed piece. All right, you have a good idea of what the actual model looks like. This one looks a little bit different, and the reason is because the intention is different in this slide. With this particular set of research questions and the problem statement that it is attached to, is to show you the exploration nature, the brainstorm nature of this process. If you look at each one of those research questions, I'm not going to go through each one of them. I'll let you read them at your leisure. If you look at anything after the word by, right? By. There you go. Anything after the word by. Notice how each one of those little pieces of information are now beginning to show you the practical side of your research. So, by providing yellow and diminished lighting, in a way, when you look at it, that's a different way of solving that problem statement. Look at the second one, providing alternative lighting, a different solution. And then third one, alternative lighting section, is still another solution. Each time I write a research question, each time I make an inquiry, what I'm essentially doing after the word by is proposing some sort of solution. I said it before, but I'll say it again. It's not that your research is going to explore all these solutions because, well, frankly, that's impossible. We wouldn't have enough time in this semester to go through each one of these. But as you begin to mature your research process and you begin to read about your topic, you could very well find out that, towards the end of section 1, you kind of go back look at your research questions and say, you know what, research question 1 really has there's a strong level of attachment that I have as a researcher to that. But number 3, you know what, zero engagement there. So you've given yourself the choices that you need in order to move forward, as long as you follow that format and you make sure that anything after the word by is a possible solution to your statement. So just to be as explicit as I can with what the word by is going to do for us as researchers, I have two kind of little statements. I have two little statements and then one last example there, and then we'll move on. So yeah, anything after the word by is basically the area that you're going to be working to fix to some degree. And what I mean by working to fix, I mean that you're going to eventually come up with practical solutions to those problems, but what you're actually fixing is after the word by. Phrased a little bit differently, but pretty much saying the same thing with the second bullet point. The practical aspect of your research, the practical aspects of your research are in many ways kind of dictated to you with the words that come after the word by. So it's almost like your what it is that you're choosing to write about going forward are very much linked and welded to the words after by. Just to take a look at this one last time here. Will students with impaired eyesight see academic gains by adjusting individual lighting needs? So, individual lighting needs. I'm thinking about differentiated lighting. I'm thinking about IEP goals. I'm thinking practically about maybe setting up like a lamp, so I can get some kind of like yellow light and more comfortable lighting instead of fluorescent light. Maybe I could put some bead bags there, to change the room design a little bit. Okay, so you see, I'm thinking along the lines, but I need to adjust the individual lighting needs. That's what eventually needs to happen, and that's what your writing will be for a good part of your thesis. This looks like the perfect time for a try it now slide. So let's do one right now. The ultimate goal is going to be to produce about 5 to 7 research questions, and more is better here. There are parts in your research where I would say less is more. In this case, more is more, because the further that you can amplify your ideas and express those ideas, the easier your writing will be. With that in mind, it is a cut and paste activity, meaning that whatever you do now during this little try it now session, you're actually going to be cutting and pasting it right into your research thesis. So don't think that whatever you do now is going to be just kind of like a brainstorm and then you're going to throw away that brainstorm. You're actually going to take whatever you do during the try it now and cut and paste it right into your document. More about that in a couple slides when we talk about the format for section 1, which we will be doing tonight. Also, the research questions very much become a centerpiece for the next lecture as we begin building towards the literature review. So you can kind of begin to see the importance of taking care of this. There's no better time to do it than right now. For those of you that took advantage during the last lecture, hopefully you saw the value in doing your work as we go through the lecture. So feel free to continue that right now. I have one more little tiny segment for research questions, and once you've written them, hopefully, and then we will call it a wrap, and I will call it a night. Well, hopefully you have some viable research questions for us to evaluate, because I have one slide on it right now. This set of questions is designed to find out whether your research questions are going to work for you, or are they going to leave you flat by the side of the road. As you begin to put your research questions into paper, if you haven't done so already, ask yourself some of these questions. Then look after the word by and see if they kind of mesh with what the question is asking. Those last two questions at the very, very bottom that are in red are the ones that are usually most important to me as an evaluator of your work. It's usually where things kind of fall apart, so I kind of like to leave them in red. And just to take the last one as an example, after you read whatever comes after your word by, is there something testable in those words that you could actually do at some point in the next couple of weeks and months? If the answer is yes, and the answer is yes to a lot of those other questions, and you know what, chances are it's a good, viable research question that you can use. If you read after the word by and you're seeing that there's very little that you could really test in your classroom, or look at the first red, anything after the word by is outside of the scope of what you're able to accomplish as a teacher and as a researcher for this class. I don't know, that research question is probably not for you. Now, you don't have to get rid of it. You don't have to delete it. But you know for yourself that going forward, that's probably not one of the research questions that you're going to be focused on in your subsequent writing. All right, folks, I am going to call that a wrap for this evening. A little teachable moment. How about this? I was well on my way to the couch and to watch some quality YouTube programming, and I said, you know what? I could do about 40 minutes. I could do about 40 minutes. Let me get some slides in, and lo and behold, I did about 12 slides. So you know what, Perez? That's right. Pat on the back. You sparkling, fresh, new day. Nothing like a nice fall afternoon to liven the spirits here a little bit. I was listening to the last slide, and maybe it's a little bit of a teachable moment for us, because to be honest, I mean, the same way that I don't want to sit here and lecture to my computer, you're not going to want to sit there and write, what it is that the course requires you to write. So we're all kind of doing stuff that wouldn't be our default activity for a nice afternoon. But the teachable moment is that, kind of like the same way that I sat down and I plugged away, and it was only 12 slides that I did the other night, but it made me feel like, okay, fine, you know what, 12 slides, it'll get done. Well, the same thing for you. you know what, a paragraph here, a paragraph there, 3, 4 paragraphs, maybe even a page or two, and you'll be surprised how quickly things will move along for you. So that is the end of my public service announcement, which for you will be right in the middle of of a lecture. But hey, you know what? We're going to roll with it. We are going to start with keywords and phrases, which are going to be instrumental in the next lecture. Here we go. As we begin to look at some of the different ways that we're going to be writing, not just section number 1, but section 2 and 3 eventually. One of the things that you're going to notice is that once you've had the ability to spend some time, and I don't love the word, but I hear it used a lot. Once you've had time to marinate on your research ideas, you'll find that a lot of times there's a very specific set of words and phrases. There's particular language that's used as part of anything, but in this case, your particular research topic. So that's what we're going to explore in the next couple of slides. Another reason why I like going into this little part of the lecture is because a lot of times students, especially new researchers, which I'm sure most of you are, have that want and that need to write with some sort of authority, and as well you should. You are going to become somewhat of an authority on your particular research topic. But they feel that in order to be that authority, they need to have very lengthy prose. They need to reinvent that English language, paragraphs on steroids, sentences that kind of take up a whole paragraph. Instead of making yourself sound like an authority figure by using more complex sentence and paragraph structure, the key words and phrases are in many ways what give writing an authority type of feel to it. It's almost like you're able to master the language around that topic, and then when you write with that language, by definition, you kind of have that authority to your words. So how do we accomplish this? Well, I'm going to send you to a place called Google Scholars. And I happen to like Google Scholars a lot because it's a nice place to begin reading and doing some light searches in order to find some of that terminology and some of those words that will give your writing the power and authority that you're looking for. For those of you that have never come across Google Scholars, essentially it's Google for research articles. If you go into just regular Google, just plain Google, and you type in the word scholars there, it'll take you to a different type of search engine. I'll give you a quick example. If you look at bullet point number 3 there, and then the proper lighting for teaching, that was the original model from lecture number 2. When I typed in proper lighting for teaching, one of the things that came up right in that first page by opening up, I would say maybe 2 or 3 articles, and not even spending all that much time, but just kind of like reading through a little bit and skimming through, I found those 3 things which later impacted my searches for the articles that I really did want to use as part of my literature review. The 3 were the physiological need. Like, I didn't realize that lighting had to do with the body and had to do with a physiological need. I know it makes sense now that we're talking about it, but at the time it hadn't really entered my thinking. Dimmable lighting in special education. I was like, hey, you know what? So maybe it doesn't have to be yellow light. Maybe it could be light that's dimmed down a little bit. And then the idea behind flicker light and pure wave. Flicker light is flicker light is a type of light that fluorescent lighting uses, and pure wave is the yellow light, or some LCD light bulbs have pure wave. All these things I never really learned about. I didn't know about it before I started looking through Google Scholars a little bit. if I drop any one of those three things into my writing, it's going to sound like I know what I'm talking about. And that's kind of the idea. We're kind of building the vocabulary for yourself, not just so that you could use it later on in your searches on EBSCO and ProQuest, which we'll model in just a little while, but also to make it a part of your writing. Let's move on here a second. So I'm going to jump right into a try it now. I know that was kind of a short little set, but I am trying to become a little more economical and efficient with the number of slides that I'm going through. I'm trying to be cognizant of the time that I'm lecturing. But anyway, I think it kind of says what it needs to say. So for the next part, for the try it now, I'd like for you to go into Google Scholars or even regular Google. It doesn't have to be necessarily Google Scholars. I'd like it because I think it's interesting, but I'd like for you to find 4 to 5 keywords or phrases here. And when we did the research questions in lecture 2, I told you more is more and try to aim for a higher number. I'm looking for the opposite here. I'm looking for quality, meaning that words and phrases that you really think, hone in and key in on what it is that your topic and your research is trying to say. So that's the first part of the try it now. The second part of the try it now is that you've had a chance to read and you've had a chance to kind of read through and get some of those keywords for yourself and key phrases for yourself together. Can you construct or reconstruct 2 research questions, 2 to 3 new research questions using those keywords and phrases? What I'm actually hoping that happens here is that you go back into your research questions from lecture 2 and now begin to add, quote unquote, that authority language into your research questions. If you use these keywords and phrases kind of over and over again, you'll see how you kind of get into like a little rhythm of using it, and it kind of follows you through section 2 and 3, and you begin to use them kind of throughout your thesis. For the last little piece, whatever keywords and phrases that you do use now and whatever new research questions you do come up with, we are going to be using it when I demo the finding articles online. So not wasted effort, definitely going to be used here. Speaking of section number 1, it is high time that we go over the format for that section. I want to give you a little inkling into my thinking here. The reason that I'm putting the format for section number 1 at this juncture in the lecture is because in the past couple slides in this particular lecture, you've gotten a lot of different tasks that are going to eventually be components of section number 1. What I'd like for you to do at this point is I'd like for you to look at the entire format and begin to see where those tasks are going to fall into your section number 1, and then by extension where they're going to fall into the overall play of your research. We're actually going to do this set of slides twice. We're going to do it once now because you've gotten a whole bunch of tasks and I want you to see how those tasks look. But in the next lecture number 3, you're going to get the next set of tasks, and I want you to review the format for section 1 again there. Section number 3 will be the last lecture that I publish in this initial offering. So this is not the only time that you will see the format for section number 1, but they both are equally as important because they tie into some different things. Let's jump in and take a look. One of the things that I've discovered over the years is that students in your position do far better with these types of assignments if they're given a very specific way of doing them. And even though there is a lot of room for individuality and individual flavor and individual flair to some degree within your different thesis projects, because we are writing an academic paper, there has to be that certain uniformity and that ability to kind of flow and deliver the information of your thesis in some sort of recognizable pattern. So the general formatting notes that I'm going to present to you today are my way of helping you get to where you want to get to. And even though there will be a very specific format, which I'm going to show you in just a slide or two, there will be room within that template for your own individuality. But for now, having these subheadings that I'm going to show you are going to help you kind of begin to chunk the paper into smaller parts. Sometimes for young researchers, it's very hard to look at a part of a thesis, and look at a 10, 12 page paper and begin to visualize how it's going to look and how it's going to all play out and unfold. The subheadings that are a part of these formatting notes are going to do that for you. In that mode, bullet point number 3. These subheadings are not suggestions. They are a template, and I would like for you to follow them as closely as you can. The only amendment to that is going to be in that last bullet point, where even though I do give you the subheadings, if you want to change the label of those subheadings and call it something else, by all means, knock yourself out. I don't mind you doing that, as long as the content inside those subheadings remains consistent with what I'm going to tell you now. So welcome to your first subheading of section 1 of your thesis. As you can see at the very, very top, I labeled subheading number 1 as the introduction. One note, please do not call the subheading 1, subheading 2, subheading 3. I try to provide labels for you. If you want to change those labels at any point in time, go ahead and feel free. May not necessarily be here, because an introduction is just an introduction, but you may find later on in your writing that you do want to vary the labels. By all means, if you want to have that academic pursuit, you're more than welcome to it. Just please don't call it subheading number 1 as part of it. So the first 1 to 2 paragraphs of your thesis is going to be kind of like a global introduction. Your textbook suggests, and I happen to agree with it, that you use kind of a creative approach here, something that a writer would call the hook, trying to bring in the reader into what it is that you're going to be exploring, and get them involved in the process to some degree. It could be something funny, it could be something serious, something powerful, something lighthearted. Whatever you do choose, I would like for it to have a very direct link at the end of those 1 to 2 paragraphs to your actual research. So you make it very, very explicit why you've brought up this creative approach or this creative story, and how it relates to your research. If you notice at the bottom in red, I try to give you some idea of how long your writing should be in each individual subheading. That is obviously just a suggestion. There are going to be parts in your thesis where you're going to perhaps want to stretch your legs a little bit and write a little bit more than what's suggested by me. And then there's other parts where you should probably stay pretty close to the suggested material. In this case, for this particular subheading, the introduction, try to stay to 1 to 2 paragraphs. Okay, let's take a look at number 2. Subheading number 2 of section number 1 is going to be your topic and statement of the problem. And if that sounds familiar, it probably should. We've kind of been working on that for a little while now, at least going back into the last lecture. And here's where you're going to begin to express that narrative of what your topic and what your problem statement is going to include. it really is the first time that as a reader, they're going to get an indication of where your direction is as far as your research through that problem statement. The good news for this particular subheading is that if you did do the try it nows, if you've been keeping up to date with the try it nows, go out on a limb and say that 50, 60, maybe even 70% of the work has been completed for you. Maybe not the entirety of the writing and the narrative that's associated with the one page here, but at least as far as the concepts that would go into it, which would make your writing a whole lot easier. As part of that, those keywords and phrases that we had generated earlier in this lecture, they are very much going to now become a part of the vocabulary that you're using in order to express the statement of the problem and the topic. Some students may find it helpful to look at it. I'm in the last bullet point. Some students may find it helpful to look at the writing here as something that has already occurred in the past, meaning that as you view it, the lens that you could view it as is, this is the problem with the way that it has been done previously. It'll give you a general direction from which to start from. It's only a page, so it's not that much real estate that you need to cover. But if you try to hit upon most of these aspects and most of these bullet points, it certainly will lead to a nice cohesive subheading number 2. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide at all, but what I like to do at times is give you some bullet points or some pointers, some writing points that you could use for a particular subheading. So for the problem statement subheading, these are some of the points that you could bring up, especially if you find yourself kind of stuck or you're not sure which direction you want to take it in. You can certainly use these bullet points as reference tools. You're not going to be writing about every single one of these reference points because, frankly, that would lead to probably a paper unto itself. But if you mix and match or pick and choose some of the different aspects here, I think it certainly will help with writing if you need that resource. Awesome, we are zipping along here. So far you have your introduction, your kind of creative little introduction there. Then you have a good statement of the problem, so we all know what's at stake here. And the next one, subheading number 3, is actually quite an easy one. Your research questions and your hypotheses. So the research questions, if you did the try it now, all you're going to do is cut and paste those research questions right in here. You're going to be aiming for 4 to 6 research questions. If you have more, that's awesome. If you have less, we'll take a look at it. But your goal is 4 to 6 research questions. Remember, those are giving you options of where your field of study is going to lie. In this particular, and then you have your hypotheses. Don't worry about your hypotheses right this second. We'll start lecture number 3 with writing those 2 hypotheses. So you'll have that coming up soon. In this particular subheading, there is no narrative. It's just bullet points. Some people feel a little uncomfortable with that, and if you do want to write a little introductory paragraph, you can go ahead and do that. But if you don't want to, you don't need to. It's just simply no narrative, just bullet points with your research questions, and then another little subheading for hypotheses. Subheading number 4 is going to be a subheading that's titled the need for research. This is a little bit of a tricky one, so I do want to spend just a minute or two talking about it here on this slide. Let's take a look at the slide itself first, and then maybe I could provide a little bit of further commentary on it. So the need for research section is a place where you, the writer, is going to very much establish the importance of your work, the importance of what it is that you would like to do with your research. Look at the question in bullet point number 2. because I think by answering it, it kind of will take you a little further down the path of what's to be expected from this subheading. If you're able to solve the problem statement, which you all have by now, hopefully, what would be the possible advantages and eventualities for your classroom? Meaning, if I'm able to take away that problem, and to some degree that's going to be your effort in section 2 and 3, is to prove that you can take away this problem. So if you were to take it away and you look towards the future, what would the advantages and the eventualities be for your classroom? Think about it like this: your observations, your personal observations, the research that you've perhaps collected in the past, even soundly conceptualized constructs, even things that kind of make sense. That's the type of importance that you need to bring here. One word of caution: the natural inclination for this subheading will be to go back to the problem and rehash the problem. And a lot of students, for some reason, overlap subheading number 4, this one, with subheading number 2. Subheading number 2 goes backwards and examines the problem as it was. Subheading number 4, this one, looks to the future and says, if I could solve these problems, if my intervention into this problem is successful, these are the benefits and the outcomes that we can expect. The reason I say this is a little bit of a harder subheading is because in many ways the other subheadings are very scripted, meaning that I'm going point by point, and if you're following along and listening to lecture, I very much do micromanage the bits and pieces of the other subheadings. I micromanage because I care, not because you're going to listen to every single word that I say, but because it's there if you need it. With this particular subheading, it's not necessarily a skill. It's more a thought process of thinking critically about the solutions that you're going to be coming up with as you go forward. 1 to 2 pages. I think that's a fairly good number. Surprisingly enough, for some of you, that might not be enough. I noticed that some students do tend to write quite a bit in this particular subheading, but 1 to 2 pages seems like a reasonable amount for you to establish that importance. Once again, here, that little cliff note page, just to avoid any type of friction that may occur should you get stuck in writing. It's here for you. It's kind of funny. I was just I was working in a Google Classroom this morning with a couple of kids that were doing a writing piece. And one of the things that I had posted yesterday was almost like something like this, almost like guiding questions that they could fall back on as they were writing their essay for their homeroom teacher. It's amazing. Once you do it, once you fall into routine of a way of teaching and a style of teaching and a paradigm of how you teach, it happens over and over again. I mean, you guys are at one of the highest levels of education in this country, and still a page like this could very well be fairly useful to you. So it works for third graders, works for master's students. I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular subheading number 5, and I'll explain why in the next slide. But for now, your subheading number 5 is going to include something called anchor articles, and these anchor articles are three-sided and scholarly works, which you are going to use as kind of like a foundation for for what it is that you're going to be doing in your literature review, but you're going to introduce them here in section number 1. And let's go to the next slide real quick. And the reason why I don't want to spend too much time on it is because lecture number 3 is almost exclusively dedicated to finding, reading, summarizing, synthesizing articles that you're going to be using for your research. The model next week and the demonstration in the next lecture is going to be not only for these anchor articles, but it will also serve as a model for your literature review. So stay tuned for that, and definitely more information will follow in lecture number 2. For now, the takeaway here is that these 3 articles are going to be the basis for your research going forward. This slide will serve as a cautionary tale for those of you that are endeavoring to complete section number 1 here. The format which I just gave you, it is going to reduce a lot of the friction that is associated with this type of writing. However, these things take time. Academic writing just takes a lot of time. It just is what it is. Time is not our friend in this particular class and in this particular semester, especially with spring coming up towards the end. So you must begin writing sooner rather than later. I have more about that at the very, very end, but please hear it once. You're going to hear it again. You'll probably hear it 100 times from me. Begin the process for yourself. Little steps, little chunks is a lot easier than cramming it all into one weekend. Let's go to our last slide here. Wrap it up, Perez. Wrap it up. We'll end off this evening with a little slide of clarity here. And I like the slide of clarity because it gives you an idea of things that you could be doing during the course of the next week or so. Things that are very much associated with what we spoke about that maybe go beyond just a little bit. Maybe go just a little bit beyond the try it nows. And in this slide of clarity, I'm asking for 30 minutes and underlined just 30 minutes in case you didn't get it the first time. And with those 30 minutes, go on to Google. Take a look. Your book calls it reconnaissance. I like the word. Do a little bit of light reconnaissance on your problem, on your topic. Just type in a couple of those keywords and phrases and get an idea of what's being written out there. You'd be surprised how 30 minutes on Google will give you a really good indication of what other people are saying, and by nature, by extension, what's going to happen is we'll get you ready for lecture number 3, which is going to be going into EBSCO and ProQuest in order to find some scholarly articles for us to take a look at. In the meantime, I am right near an hour and a half, so I'm gonna call it a wrap for this lecture. I do hope you enjoyed the content. I know it went from very, I guess, very broad in some degree in the welcome video in lecture number 1 to now really diving into the content. So I hope you were able to stick with it. As always, any issues, any problems, by all means give me a quick email and we can certainly talk about it. I am gonna go record slide number 1, and I will catch you guys in lecture number 3. Bye everybody.